When you picture Rome, you see the Colosseum. You see glory, power, and spectacle, the roar of the crowd, the clash of gladiators. The Roman state gave free grain and staged epic games for hundreds of thousands of its citizens. It was the envy of the ancient world. But what if this policy, this famous bread and circuses, wasn't an act of kindness? What if it was the poison that hollowed out the world's greatest empire from the inside? We're told barbarians at the gates destroyed Rome. We're told it was a military collapse. But the barbarians just kicked in a rotten door. The real rot started centuries earlier. It didn't start on the battlefield. It started in the balance sheet. It began with a simple, generous idea. This is the story of how the world's most generous welfare program didn't save Rome. It bankrupted it. This story starts not with an emperor, but with a farmer. The early Roman Republic was built on the small farmer, the citizen soldier. These men farmed their own land. They were the army's backbone. They were fiercely independent. They conquered the world for Rome. But these long wars took them away from home for years. While they fought, a new elite back home got rich, buying up their small farms. They created huge estates called latifundia. They worked these estates with cheap slave labor, slaves captured in those same wars. The returning soldiers were heroes, but they were also homeless. They found their farms gone and their families bankrupt. They had no choice but to flood into the city of Rome. They had no land, no job, and a lot of anger. By 133 BC, Rome was a powder keg, a tiny, super-rich elite, and a massive unemployed urban mob, the proletari. Two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, tried to fix this. They were aristocrats, but they saw the danger. Their idea was simple: land reform. Give the public land back to the poor, or break up the massive estates. This was a direct threat to the wealthy senators. It threatened the source of their power. The elite had a choice: reform, or crush the reformers. They chose violence. Senators and their gangs murdered Tiberius. 10 years later, they murdered Gaius. The message was clear: there would be no reform. The rich would not share, but the mob was still there, still angry, still hungry. If the elite wouldn't solve the problem, they had to manage it. Gaius Gracchus, before his death, had another idea: a state-subsidized grain dole, the cura annoni. It wasn't free yet, but it sold grain to the poor at a stable, low price. It kept them from starving. It was a brilliant political tool, and a fatal economic one. It shifted power from the Senate to any man who could control the food. Ambitious generals saw this new power. Men like Marius, Sulla, and the most famous of all, Julius Caesar. Caesar mastered it. He didn't just offer grain, he offered a show. He staged the most incredible games Rome had ever seen. He knew the mob wanted more than food. They wanted distraction. He bought their loyalty and used them to destroy the Senate. The first emperor, Augustus, inherited this system. He knew he couldn't rule by force alone. He had to keep the mob happy. He formalized the program. The grain was no longer subsidized. It was free. Free grain for 200,000 male citizens in Rome. And the games? They became a permanent state institution. This was the official birth of bread and circuses. It worked. The city was quiet. The emperor was loved. But Augustus had just set a 500-year time bomb. The program was unbelievably expensive. The city of Rome produced almost nothing. It was a massive net drain on the treasury. All this grain had to be imported. It was shipped from the breadbasket provinces of Egypt and North Africa, the games, the aqueducts, the baths, the temples. Everything was paid for by taxes from the provinces. For a century, this model seemed to work. This was the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. The empire was expanding. New conquests in Britain, Dacia, and the East brought new gold, new taxes, and new slaves. Emperor Trajan celebrated his victory in Dacia. He held 123 straight days of games. 11,000 animals were killed. 10,000 gladiators fought. The cost was staggering, but the gold from Dacia paid for it. But then the expansion stopped. Under Emperor Hadrian, Rome stopped conquering. It built walls and went on defense. But the cost of the bread and circuses did not stop. It only grew. The military, the bureaucracy, the grain dole, the bills kept coming. The Roman state had a massive permanent budget deficit. But you can't just print more gold and silver. Or can you? Rome found a way. It's called debasement. Emperor Nero started it. He ordered the mint to make the silver denarius with a little less silver, maybe 10% less. He mixed in cheaper metals like bronze. Nobody noticed at first. And just like that, the government could mint more coins. It could pay its soldiers and buy its grain. It was the first documented case of currency dilution. And it was a fatal addiction. The next emperor did it again, and the next. Why make hard political choices when you can just dilute the money to pay for the circuses? By 250 AD, the crisis of the 3rd century hit. The denarius, once 95% pure silver, was now less than 1% silver. Everyone knew it. The money was worthless. Prices for grain, oil, and wine exploded. A soldier's pay, once a source of pride, was now meaningless. They were paid in trash. So the army didn't just get angry, it took over. If the state's money was worthless, the army would just take things. They would take grain, cattle, and supplies by force, and they would make their own emperors. Generals would march on Rome, kill the current emperor. They would promise the soldiers a raise in actual gold, not the bronze trash. This happened over and over. In a 50-year span, Rome had 26 different emperors. Most were murdered by their own troops. The circus was now a brutal, endless civil war. And with the currency worthless, the state couldn't buy grain. Soldiers would go to farms and take the grain by force. So what did the farmers do? Many farmers abandoned their land entirely. Emperor Diocletian tried to fix this with pure force. He issued the edict on maximum prices in 301 AD. He set a legal price for everything: grain, beef, eggs, clothing. The punishment for charging more? Death. It was a total disaster. Goods vanished from the markets overnight. Why sell something for a legal price that was less than it cost to make? The edict was ignored. The inflation raged on. Emperor Constantine saw the West was a lost cause. The economy was hollow. The currency was dead. His solution? He abandoned it. In 330 AD, he moved the capital to a new city, Constantinople. He took the gold, the talent, and the resources. He left Rome behind. The smart money left the city. The city of Rome was now just a symbol. It was still getting its free grain from Africa, but the system was dying. The final Killshot was simple and logistical. In 439 AD, the Vandal tribe did the unthinkable. They built a fleet, crossed from Spain, and conquered North Africa. This was the single province that was feeding the city of Rome. The Vandal king, Gaiseric, cut off the grain supply. The bread was gone. The circuses had stopped long ago. The city of Rome, once 1 million people, began to starve. Its population collapsed to a fraction of its former self. When the barbarian king Odoacer finally sacked Rome in 476 AD, he wasn't conquering an empire. He was just tipping over a corpse. The bread and circuses economy hadn't saved Rome. It had made its citizens dependent. It hadn't stabilized the state. It had bankrupted it. It hollowed out the currency. It destroyed agriculture. It turned citizens into spectators. It bought their loyalty with distractions, while the foundations of the economy crumbled. So why does this 1,500-year-old story matter? Because the Roman model is a tempting one. It's the sound of a politician promising something for nothing. It's the comfort of endless distraction. Today, we are drowning in circuses, streaming services, 24-hour news, social media, and multi-billion-dollar sports leagues. We have more entertainment available to us than an emperor could have dreamed of. Is this keeping us engaged or just quiet? And what about the bread? Our modern economies are built on complex systems of debt, credit, and subsidies. Global government debt has hit over $97 trillion. Total global debt is over $315 trillion. Governments are spending money they don't have. They are running massive permanent deficits, just like Rome did. But we don't debase coins with bronze anymore, and we dilute our currency in a much cleaner, more high-tech way. It's called quantitative easing. Central banks create trillions of new dollars, yen and euros from nothing, with a keyboard entry. This new money floods the system. It pays for government spending. It props up markets. It's the modern grain dole. But it makes every dollar you've saved worth a little less. This is inflation, a hidden tax on your savings. Our paychecks feel like they are worthless. They don't go as far. Just like the Roman soldier's denarius. The Roman lesson is not that helping the poor is bad. It's not. The lesson is that a system built on distraction and consumption is brittle. It masks real problems until it's too late. It makes the economy feel strong, even while the foundations are rotting. The circuses are amazing. The bread is still delivered. But the underlying productive economy is shrinking. The state stops encouraging production. What happens when the cost of the spectacle and the subsidies becomes more than the real economy can support? Rome gives us the answer. Here are the 3 clear takeaways from Rome's fall. 1. An economy of distraction is fragile. When citizens become spectators, the state loses its foundation of productive citizens. 2. There's no such thing as a permanent subsidy. Someone always has to pay. For Rome, it was the provinces. Then, the currency itself. 3. The real cost isn't financial, it's social. Bread and circuses destroyed the Roman work ethic. It created a dependent class. Here's the warning. Rome didn't feel like it was collapsing, at least not to the people in the Colosseum. For many, the shows were great right up until the end. They were comfortable. They were distracted. And by the time the grain ships from Africa stopped coming, it was too late. The system was too broken to fix. History doesn't just tell us what happened. It tells us what happens. The patterns are repeating. If you want to see the patterns that others miss and understand the history of money and power, hit that subscribe button. We post videos every week on the financial and historical forces that shape our world. Click the bell so you never miss an update. The past has the answers. We'll show you where to look.